James, Gary Lineker has insisted his Nazi tweet was factually accurate. He said, let's just remind ourselves what Gary Lineker actually said at the time. This was the 7th of March. There is no huge influx. This is talking about immigration, obviously. I'm just reading this. There is no huge influx. We take far fewer refugees than other major European countries. This is just an immeasurably cruel policy directed at the most vulnerable people in language that is not dissimilar to that used by Germany in the 30s. And I'm out of order. He has reignited the asylum row. What do you make of this briefly, James?
Well, I just think everyone reaches for the analogies about the 1930s in Germany, and I just think
lazy, offensive,
lazy. It's wrong,
stupid.
And I think that you can make a better point if you just take a bit more time thinking about it. You know, you can make the contextual point about the rest of Europe, but I do think historically, if you look at sort of illegal migration, we have got a high number right now, and I think that's not something to be you can be concerned about justifiably.
Of course you can. Without being racist. I mean, it's a perfectly legitimate thing to be concerned about. Well, let's talk now to Robin Aitken. He is a journalist and author of Can We Trust the BBC? Robin, thank you so much for joining us this morning. How are you?
Good morning to you, Peter.
Gary Lineker, as we say in Northern Ireland, what a tube. What do you make of this?
Well, I mean, the man is a fantastic egotist. And what gets me about this is that Lineker has humiliated the BBC's top brass.
Yes, he has.
And they've been made to look entirely powerless in the face of one of their highly paid stars, who now, it seems, can say whatever he wishes.
Well, it's interesting because if we look at what he's... Sorry to interrupt you, Robin, but what he's actually said here, I agree with you. The Match of the Day presenter told Men's Health UK, random, that corporation bosses admitted they had got it wrong, as he also defended his extraordinary comments comparing the government to the Nazis in an interview with former Labour spin doctor Alastair Campbell, who is the person who... well, Gary Lineker owns the company that Alastair Campbell's podcast is part of. Anyway, Gary Lineker repeated his claim that the language in the debate over the government's Rwanda refugee policy reminds us of the debate in Germany in the 1930s. I mean, he's tempering the language there. That's not exactly what he said in the tweet.
No, that's true. I think he has stepped back just a mite. But what gets me about this, Peter, is this, that I was a BBC journalist for 25 years, and the book you mentioned, actually, which I wrote a long time ago, I've written subsequent books to that, on the BBC, have been about the BBC's inability to live up to its code of impartiality. Now, a lot of people in the BBC do try sincerely, I think, my ex-colleagues, many of them do try very hard to be impartial. They don't always manage it, and I think that's a very human failing. What gets me about what Lineker is doing is this, that if he had any concern at all for the reputation of the BBC in terms of its impartiality, remember, impartiality for the BBC is not something which is just an add-on extra. It's the very core of the thing. The reason being that you and I all have to pay our TV licenses, and therefore you and I can all expect our views to be fairly represented. And that means that prominent BBC people cannot just go shooting their mouth off about whatever it is they
cares about himself, but he doesn't seem to care about the organisation. I mean, I worked for the BBC for a couple of years, a bit longer than a couple of years, actually, and there are lots of people, in fact, some of the most impressive people I've ever worked with worked for the BBC, and one of my bosses, a guy called Nick Sutton, who's now at Sky, I mean, I couldn't begin to tell you what his political views are. I wouldn't have a clue how he votes because he took the impartiality so incredibly seriously. And I tried to as well before I joined a political party and did a political job. But for 10 years, I was in journalism, and before I went into politics, and I tried really hard to be as impartial as possible, see all the angles, talk to different people. I worked as a journalist in Northern Ireland as well. Gary Lineker, there's no attempt here. There's no attempt whatsoever. Right. And many people who are paid an absolute fraction of what he earns, £1.36 million a year, care about this stuff and want the BBC presumably to be an impartial organisation or have some desire for that to happen. He doesn't care.
No, absolutely, and you're on the money there. I mean, funny enough, I used to work with Nick Sutton. I think he's a Lib Dem.
Really? Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
but talking of Northern Ireland, you'll probably remember Dennis Murray.
Yes.
There was a BBC journalist who was doing an incredibly difficult job and walked a very tight line. And I thought, I worked alongside him. I was over in Northern Ireland quite a bit. And I used to think it's amazing that he manages to appear impartial on a subject so vexed. Lineker's problem is this. I think that he doesn't, I don't think he really understands how important it is that the BBC appears impartial. The reason is that people like Lineker give the BBC's enemies, of whom there are many, who would like to see the BBC totally demolished and destroyed. It gives them the ammunition they need to say, look, the BBC is just a nest of lefties.
Yeah.
They feel entitled to spread their own propaganda. This idea that Suella Braverman uses the language similar to the Nazis, I mean, it's a fatuous.
It's really offensive, actually, to a load of people who've been, you know, who've relatives there are people still alive who went through the Holocaust and so on. I mean, this is just not the same thing. Anyway, listen, thank you. We've got to leave it there. But Robin, thank you very much. I know you're author of Can We Trust the BBC? But what is your most recent book, Robin? Because I know you've written a lot on this, and you said
here it is. It's called The Noble Liar.
And what's that about?
It's also about the BBC.
Okay, excellent stuff.
It's a rather more wide-ranging book and a better written book. I'm a bit of a one-trick pony.
Right, great stuff. No, Robin, thank you very, very much indeed for joining us. I appreciate you coming on as a fellow author of The Secret Life of Special Advisors, now out in paperback. James Heal, author of Out of the Blue, about Liz Truss as well. So
one-trick ponies. Thank you. Yeah.
Also now available. So yes, no, very good. What did you make of what Robin was saying?
I mean, he sums it up really. And I've got friends who work at the BBC. You know, people you hugely respect, etc. And you know, it's just frustrating. They are fighting a battle commercially. They're fighting one for funding, and they're also fighting one for editorial in a time when their values are under attack more than anyone.
But it's perfectly legitimate for people who are saying, I am paying, in a cost of living crisis, I am paying whatever it is, 150, 155 pounds, I can't remember exactly how much it is, but it's around that per year for a service that I perhaps don't watch anymore, I perhaps don't listen to anymore because I don't like the output necessarily, or because perhaps of Gary Lineker or people like him, and you say, you know exactly how he votes, you know exactly what his political opinions are, yet at the same time you're forced to pay this tax.
Yes, I mean, I think that is a really good point, which hands the critics of the BBC ammunition. But also, just to step back, I mean, it's not just about Gary Lineker, it's about BBC management as well. And when they suspended him, I was like, why have they done that? You reignited a row. You don't have the political capital to see it through. And
he's bigger than you.
Yeah, exactly.
Sort of.
Yeah, and then you've got Alastair Campbell, you know, for instance, running around saying it's all political, you know, of course, not mentioning the fact that Alastair Campbell...
He would never have sought to influence the BBC when he was a director of communications at Number 10.
Something else. But it's just sort of microcosmic row of the broader problems of BBC mismanagement, and we're going to see more of this in the coming months and years, I imagine, to come.